Hello and welcome to another episode of the CEO Peak. I am Dave Osh, your host today. The CEO Peak focuses on CEOs who individually and collectively build leadership teams that evolve their capacity and capability to create outcomes that matter most for their organizations and the society. And such a leader is our guest today, Morten Brøgger, the CEO of Wire. Wire is an enterprise-grade, end-to-end encrypted collaboration platform. And Morten has over 20 years extensive go-to-market and SaaS experience. Originally from Denmark, now located in the San Francisco Bay Area, Morten leads a multinational company across Europe and the United States. I was fascinated by his recent interview for the Forbes magazine about the impact of COVID-19 on the future of work. Morten challenged the axiom that employees are rewarded based upon merit rather than location. And here's a quote from that interview. COVID-19 has driven the shift in mindset and turned remote work skeptics into advocates. Having been unleashed from fixed location mindset, there's going to be a much more open and viable market for talent. So hello, Morten, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for the very kind introduction you made here. I could barely do that better myself.
Good. You know, I was so fascinated with this article about pretty much about the future of work. You know, and I noticed the traditional globalization was very transactional. Right? It was about looking for cheap places, arbitrage of cost, or access to markets, legally or from other reasons. And here you bring a little bit different views about future of work. So I'd love to hear more about it in the context of what you're doing in Wire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the future of work is always been interesting for a company like Wire. We're trying to disrupt collaboration by actually making it secure. And clearly the future of work, which I think is really about, how do we involve new people into the workplace? Where do we work, and what will be the requirements and the demands for new colleagues and new employees in the future? We all know that the younger generation wanted to work from anywhere. And that they were very engaged in new, easy to collaborate and communicate tools. But how would that actually work? How would we make sure that things that are secret or confidential at work was kept secret? And how did we also want to comply with an increasing demand for privacy and also an increasingly complicated regulation around privacy going forward? So I think everyone knew exactly where this was heading, right? And then the COVID-19 crisis hit us, and the world was turned upside down, and the future of work literally arrived overnight, maybe over a few nights, but like very condensed. And more or less the whole world was forced to work from home to a very, very large extent. And I think none of us was ready for it. And even me leading a company who knew that this was good for the company going forward, I realized that I wasn't even personally ready for it. My biggest concern was, how does all the employees in Wire work from home? How does this work? Will they actually get their stuff done, or will they just enjoy in the afternoon, watch TV, play video games? Are they actually going to get some work done? I was a little bit concerned, and to be honest, I was projecting maybe some of myself into this because if I was at home, maybe I wanted to read a little bit longer articles on the internet in between meetings instead of preparing it. Maybe I thought everyone was like me. And I also like to personally interact with people. That was my strength. And maybe other people wanted to do this. But I have to admit that the world adapted to these new circumstances very, very rapidly. And that sets a whole new set of requirements to companies. What are the work policies? What are the tools that they're working? And how do we keep employees engaged and focused and motivated through all this stuff? Super, super interesting transformation in my perspective.
Yeah. And Morten, you have a little bit of a head start because you already work in a way remotely because you have team around the globe. So how did it help you? What did you learn that you can share with other CEOs or leaders that can help them, especially when we are moving faster than ever towards this future of work?
Well, I would say there's some learnings as a person, and there's some learnings as a CEO that comes into the place. Let's take the personal learnings first, right? Because as I said, I'm a social person. I like to be with my teams because I felt that's where I had the dialogue, and it's really hard to do this. I like to have our team meetings where you can be in person and you can take questions and stuff like that. And that stopped. And I think from our point of view, and what became one of my failures, we were way too slow to basically get that ramped up again, so that you had the virtual team meetings with the questions and all that stuff. But in that process, as a CEO, also understanding that's not a one-man show. Like to a much higher extent, when things get personal, you have to be able to delegate not only to my executive team, but actually also to the middle management team in the company. How do you increase the empowerment to do this? How do you make sure that the weekly calls happen if I cannot join? How do you make sure that your middle management team has the necessary information and the motivation and the knowledge to work on what is the right things? These are things that even in a company like ours, we had the tools, we were geared up to do it. We have offices in 4 different countries. We have 24 different nationalities working with us. One should think we were above average prepared. And we probably were, but yet it had our challenges, and we were learning to adjust to this. I have to say, I'm super proud of the team. It's been an amazing experience. There are some people who are eager to get back to work, and there's some people who learned that they are super productive from home. But it has forever changed how we are working in Wire, just like I think it has forever changed how most companies around the world will actually work.
And maybe already back to work happened. This is work, right?
Yeah.
So maybe, who knows, maybe we won't have back to work as we used to have as back to work, right?
Oh, we won't. We won't. It'll be a mix, right? I still think people will meet. At least, old dinosaurs like myself will not go extinct overnight. So some people will still meet, and I think that makes a ton of sense. But how and where you work will be way more distributed, right? And as you refer to the article and forms, and what I believe strongly in is that this is also opening the eyes and opening the opportunity. How can you actually attract some of the best talent into your company without them having to be in a certain place? And as I highlighted, and I've taken that as a personal challenge, something that we need to be better at, something I need to be better at, is fundamentally, how do you actually reward this? How do you attract this? How do you allow this going forward? And not necessarily is the candidate in this location, do they have to move to this location in order to work, which is like old school, I would say, requirements. And that to a much larger extent becomes a voluntary decision by some of the talent joining companies going forward.
Yeah. Morten, in the last conversation that we had, you had something that stuck with me. As you said that the work can become your workplace.
Yes.
And I think it was in the context of going to being a multinational company. So what did you think? What comes to your mind when you see that the world is your workplace?
To me, it's taken quite a few years. For the past 15 years, I've been working international, right? This is my 4th country. As you mentioned, I'm born and grew up in Denmark, had my first job. Most of my education was in Denmark. And then I had the joy of working and living 2 years in Switzerland. I had the joy of working and living 8 years in Luxembourg, and now I'm on my 6th year in the US. And probably in my second or third country, actually, when I was in Luxembourg, that was a global company. Right, we had offices in 5 out of 7 continents, and yes, Antarctica was one of the continents we did not have an office in. So that involved quite a lot of traveling, and that clearly involved a lot of different cultures. And what I learned there was very quickly, not everyone thinks and deals with problems the same way as you do, but actually everyone has a valid input and a valid contribution to solve a problem. And if you are open and if you want to, you can learn and be better by listening and observing how other people do it and create space to it. And I think to me, that was when I realized that being international and opening up yourself and your company to a lot of different culture is actually extremely rewarding, and that allows you to be much better at things. And not just because the headquarters in a certain country or certain location means that everyone has to think and do and solve problems the same way. I think that was the transition. To give you a very hardcore example, we offshored a lot of our support functions and our R&D functions to India. And at that time, we were headquartered in Luxembourg. And we spent years on actually really getting the benefit out of it. We did not really get the real benefit out of this one until we said, we have to stop having a safety net at headquarters where we can kind of like correct mistakes and all that stuff, and we can remote manage. We had to hire local managers, and we have to take the safety net away. And then we actually started giving the space to the talented people we had around the world. And we actually started seeing quality and productivity reaching completely different levels, because everyone knew there is no safety net any longer. So these are some of the things that has given me great learnings by actually failing and then trying a different way of solving a problem.
Can you give an example for a challenge that you had earlier that you overcame, and some people can learn from that, how to deal with challenges that come to multicultural workforce?
Yeah, it's to try and understand why they're different. What are the core differences and what is different? One of my favorite stories is, I think it was the second time I was on a sales trip to Japan. I kind of like, someone said, here's a couple of good advice, and this is a very important meeting. In Japan, the boss will sit in the middle, and his lieutenants will basically flank him. He will not say a lot, but his lieutenant will ask questions. He may even close his eyes, but that actually just means he's listening. And then I studied it a little bit. And then one interesting thing from actually studying how different culture acts is that I personally, I'm like very animated. I like to use my hands when I'm explaining something because I think it reinforces it, and it's also the kind of personality I am. But I actually read that using your hand and hand gestures in a meeting in Japan receives the opposite of what you want to do, because they're not used to that. So they will just see, what is he doing? Why is he waving all the time? And they will forget to pay attention. And the trick I read is, when you have the meeting and you're presenting, sit on your hands, because then you can't wave them. And then then the conversation starts flowing naturally. So I did that, and I've done that ever since when I'm in Japan. And it to me, it actually works, and it makes me smile. And it's such a small learning on how I learn to communicate better when I'm in that particular place of this planet.
Beautiful. That's such a beautiful example.
So it's the little things where we're different, but it can have big impacts, right?
Yeah. So let's wrap it up, Morten. Anything that you want to summarize with, either something that you want to, that summarize the whole lesson of the future of work, multicultural, multinational, anything that you want to end this interview with?
No, yeah, I would just say, even if you're successful, you're strong-minded, maybe even stubborn, have strong opinions about certain things, and have good experience on how to deal with certain things, is like, keep listening. I keep saying, and I also tell my children, there's a reason we have one mouth and two ears. It's because we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak. And by that, I also mean you need to be willing to listen and willing to adapt to all the good input you get on how things can actually be better. And even for me, that is sometimes difficult, but I think that is actually important.
Yeah, I remember that was my toughest shift personally that I had made before, to talk less, listen more. And unfortunately, it happened only in my 40s. You need to get some gray hair to be in this position, to let go of the ego and just be there with your team and listen. So that was a beautiful summary of actually the shift that leaders need to make. So Morten, thank you so much for taking time out of your business and sharing your wisdom with the audience. And I'm looking to see you in future episodes. And you, the audience, thank you for being with us today. And looking forward to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dave.